Weekend Warriors Home Improvement Show, built by Par Lumber. When it comes to big or small projects around the home, Tony and Corey have got the know-how and the answers to make your life just a bit easier. Here they are, your Weekend Warriors, Tony and Corey.
Corey, when was the last time you painted a room? When did you paint some walls?
Man, the last time I think I painted anything was when we painted our studio.
Well, that was a long time ago.
I know. And you know what's funny? I have a big painting project coming up. We have not painted a portion of our house, our living room, and our hallway since we moved in.
So the vaulted ceiling is what you're talking about.
Well, that too, but the walls and the ceiling. And we bought our house almost 10 years ago, and it's been the same color from the previous owners. We painted a lot of everything else because it was terrible, but this color we didn't hate, and we've left it. But it's looking a little dingy. It's looking a little old. You know, we've moved things around. There's some chipped wall color and sheetrock damage that I'm going to fix. So I actually have been also replacing floor trim, the base trim, and I changed some things around. And the other thing that we're doing is I'm swapping out some of those old bulb lights, you know, the round lights that come down. I'm taking those out and I'm putting in can lights. So I have some sheetrock repair in my ceiling. So I actually have a large painting project coming up where I'm going to repaint all of my ceilings in my hallway and living room area and in that vaulted area.
That's a big project.
And I'm going to repaint all of the walls in my living room, dining room, hallway areas. And I'm going to repaint all of my trim and my doors because a bunch of it's new and I need to match the old with the new. And the doors are also have not probably been painted since the 80s. So I'm taking on a big paint job.
Well, I'll tell you what, obviously, this is the time of year where you would tackle a project like that because the rain and the snow and the ice, the weather that's coming kind of prohibits you from doing a lot of projects around the outside of the home. So an interior project like that is perfect for this time of year.
Yeah.
And I know that you love to paint. So
I really do.
There's zero possibility that you're subbing this out to a painting contractor.
Well, so I'll be honest, I wouldn't not sub it out. However, it's very expensive. We recently had somebody come in and give us a bid just to repaint the walls in our living room and dining room areas, which are kind of one big room. And they wanted like $6,000
to paint the interior.
Just to paint the walls on the interior. It's, you know, it's vaulted. There's a vault. They probably wanted to bring in some sort of scaffolding, but I was blown away. Like I said, there is no way I am paying $6,000 to paint this. And I mean, the paint, it's probably 4 gallons of paint at the most.
Right.
So, I mean, we're talking maybe $200 in paint with really, really high quality paint. I have all of the stuff. You know, yes, I'm going to have to get on a ladder, but I mean, that was crazy. So we're definitely not paying people to come in and do it. I'm not opposed to it, but I just can't do it.
And yeah, the vaulted area that's a commitment. And that you're going to have to make a commitment. You're going to have to get maybe some scaffolding. You're going to have to probably combine some scaffolding with a long, handle, 6 foot or something handle with a roller on the end of it.
Yeah,
it's a big project, cutting in but portions, I know you love that.
Cutting in portions is going to be difficult because it is. Yeah, it's probably 18 feet up there.
I have a tip for you. Jetpack. Get a jetpack that has like an autopilot setting on it so you can just sort of hover, or a hoverboard. If you get a hoverboard and you can sort of hover just about 5 feet below, the ceiling, then you can reach up and That's the ticket probably.
Yeah. I think 2015 came and went, and we never got hoverboards.
Oh, you didn't? Well, there is, just borrow a DeLorean.
Go forward in the future.
You can go get it.
We'll see.
DeLorean.
I might just get a ladder. I think that might work.
So not nearly as much fun or
Not
dangerous, but so let's talk about painting. There's a lot of things to be considered when you're gonna tackle a paint project at your home.
Absolutely. We've got some tips today. Tony and I bounce back and forth. I've done lots and lots of painting in my life. I know you have too, Tony. And so that's what we want to share with you guys today is some tips. And like I said, Tony said, I enjoy painting. I really do. It's a lot of work, but it's also rewarding. And it's something that anyone can do as long as you're patient. You know, if you really want a high quality paint job, follow these tips and just be patient, and you can do it. You know, yes, getting up on a ladder can be a little bit dangerous. I wouldn't recommend that for everyone, but I'm okay with it.
Well, let's talk about some of the tips for having a successful interior home painting project.
Or exterior.
Or
exterior. These kind of both, interior and exterior. But yeah, the very first one is preparation. You want to make sure that every surface is prepared properly by either cleaning, sanding, priming, because you have to understand that the paint that you're putting on is only as good as the surface that you're applying it to. So if you've got exterior trim that is peeling away and it's just really old, if you just paint right over the top of that, the paint underneath was peeling away. So your new paint is just going to peel off with the old. You're not giving it a good surface to adhere and bond to. So you want to scrape it, you want to sand it, you want to put a seal coat on it, primer, and then paint. Interior walls, you're going to run into issues in, say, a kitchen. If you're painting a kitchen, if you've ever painted a kitchen, an old kitchen, you're going to run into issues if you don't clean the walls. I recommend using TSP, trisodium phosphate. Clean the walls, degrease them, get all that stuff off, because guess what? Paint doesn't stick to grease very well. So unless you've done that, you're just going to run into problems. It's not going to look good.
Also, I have an interior situation where I also have to treat the surface before I can paint over it. I have a dog whose paws reach the windowsill of some of my windows. And there's one particular window in the house that she is very fond of. And so she will go to that window and her paws will go up on, and then when she goes up and comes down and goes up and comes down, she scratches the sill. The sill is made out of 1x8. And so I need to go back and repaint that sill, but those scratch marks will show right through because the bare wood has become exposed in those areas. So I'm going to need to go back and sand that super smooth, clean that with tack cloth or something to make sure that I get all that dust out of there. Put a good coat of primer on there. Very important because she scratched off some of the primer that was on that wood, and paint doesn't always stick really good to wood or other surfaces. So you put primer on there to help it adhere. Another example a lesson that I learned some years ago, I built a replacement handrail on my front porch out of cedar. And after I completed the handrail, I was so proud of myself. I had time left in the weekend. So I went ahead and painted the handrail. But guess what? It
was green.
That cedar was green and not dry. And then it leached out water and tannins, and it went right through the paint. And it just looked absolutely terrible. I painted it, sadly, as I look back now, 3 times before I bought primer and primed it in order to keep that in. Primer is intended to keep stains and things in, and also it has adhesion properties that paint doesn't have, and then the paint comes along and adheres to the primer very well. Mm-hmm. So Primer plays a very important role. People don't always use primer, but primer is important in preparation specifically because it will reduce the amount of paint that you have to purchase to cover whatever previous color was underneath.
Well, and keep in mind too, priming is an important thing if you're painting over something raw or if you're painting over something glossy. If you've got a high gloss finish that you're trying to paint over, sometimes new paint won't stick to that gloss. So you can use certain types of primer that will stick to shiny surfaces, or you can sand them or do what you need to do. But also, if you're painting over old colors that are dark, if you've got a wall that, you went through your goth phase and you painted your whole house black,
right,
and you want to repaint that white or something, well, painting over a dark color like that, especially some reds, like if you had painted a room like a really dark Bordeaux or maroon or something, painting over that is very difficult. You'll go through, like you said, 2, 3, 4 coats of paint.
And the problem with that is that paint is so much more expensive than primer.
Yep.
Primer is inexpensive comparatively. So you buy the inexpensive primer to color the deep color, to cover the color, or to cover the raw, or to cover the glossy. And then you come along with the expensive paint and just do one coat.
And also, if you're going the other way, if you've got a white wall that you're trying to finish with a dark color, you can go, when you're at the paint store, you can ask them about tinting primer. Not all primers can be tinted, so you'll have to talk to them about which ones they would recommend. There are paints out there that they call self-priming or priming paints. I'm not a huge believer in those. I know there's a lot of technology that's come a long way, but what I would say is to get a primer tinted with some of the color that you're going to paint the wall with. And that way, when you put the first coat of primer on the wall, it's a lot closer.
It's muted, much muted.
It's a lot closer to the final color, and you'll use less paint. Because you're right, the paint is far more expensive. So, but anyway, that's just some good tips on preparing your surfaces. All surfaces, if you're painting them, preparation is key. It's the number one. And then, next one on the list, Tony, is how to choose the right paint. I used to work in a paint department. Did I tell you that?
You did not tell me that, and I thought I knew everything about you.
I know. Back, 30 years ago when I was...
3?
No, I guess not 30 years ago, but close to it.
Yep.
Outside of high school, I worked for a home center in northern Michigan called Menards.
Oh, Menards. I'm familiar with Menards.
Yeah, they got a NASCAR team.
Yeah.
But I worked in the paint department there, and I learned so much about paint and painting and paint supplies. It was a really fun job. But we got to learn about the different finishes of paint.
Oh, yeah.
Where you would use certain finishes. And what I mean by finish, I mean matte, eggshell, satin, semi-gloss, gloss, high gloss. Why would you use certain things in certain applications? And then also the different types of paint. They've got latex, oil. They've got hybrids that are half latex, half oil. They've got some that are acrylic enamels.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of different paints out there. And honestly, the best thing to do is to talk to a professional at the paint store about what you're painting. For example, painting cabinets. They make special paint that have enamel in them that are slow drying. So if you have, one thing about acrylics is that they dry really quickly, typically. And if they're great because they're water-based, but if you're painting, say, cabinetry, they don't lay out. And what I mean by that is if you paint it with a brush
and you get brush strokes,
they will stay there because it dries so quickly.
It doesn't sort of mellow out or dissolve into the flush surface.
They call that laying out.
Mm-hmm.
So it won't flatten, it won't lay out. So if you get the right paint, that dries slower. And sometimes you can even get additives to paint. A lot of people that spray, you can put additives in the paint to make it dry even slower.
Interesting.
So as you spray it on, it will flatten out very, very nicely. And you can get roll-on paints that are just as good. There's some really good paints out there that you can put on with a roller and a brush that will dry so slowly that they lay on that surface super, super flat. And it looks like you sprayed them.
Yeah.
So if you're having trouble, if you've ever painted a piece of furniture with a roller and you can see every roll mark and every brush mark,
right,
you probably used the wrong paint.
Yep, use the wrong paint. That's a good tip. Another one example of the same thing you were talking about. Semi-gloss is a type of paint you would find in the bathroom or in the kitchen because of splashing and
high touch points.
The nature of what takes place in those rooms.
Cleanability.
You'd want it to be able to be wiped back. If you were to take a wet rag to wipe matte or flat paint, you'll find that the paint comes off on the rag.
Right.
Those are prime examples. I have matte finishes on my doors and trim work in my home, and I love the look of matte finish. It's gorgeous, but I don't want it in the kitchen or the bathroom where I have to wipe the walls to keep them clean.
Yeah. Me personally, matte finish you'd see on a ceiling. Absolute matte finish on a ceiling, or matte finish on the walls, maybe say in a bedroom. But in a hallway, I would go minimum eggshell.
Eggshell in the hallway.
High touch areas, eggshell, satin. Satin looks fine in a living room walls, dining room walls. But like you said, in the kitchen, in the bathroom, semi-gloss on the walls. And then I'm a high gloss trim guy.
Oh, really?
I like the trim with the high gloss.
Super shiny.
It's getting touched all the time. You know, as you're coming in and out, touching your doors, getting constantly touched. You can wipe, you can clean, you can wash, really scrub all of that high gloss, and it comes right off. So that's me personally. But yeah. I know some people don't like the look, and they're just willing to keep repainting it.
Or they just never wash it.
Yeah, true.
You know, let it get just germy.
Dingy.
Yeah, dingy and germy.
Or just paint it all brown. Brown trim.
Glad I painted my doors brown. 'Cause your hands are gross. Another important thing to consider are the tools that you're going to use when you're painting. And I'm going to be honest with you, Corey. I know you have opinions about the types of brush, like horsehair or, full synthetic or whatever. Talk to me a little bit about how you choose paint brushes and rollers when you're doing a painting project at your home.
Well, they make brushes a lot on, yes, they have high quality brushes. There's mid quality, low quality. I'm in the camp of buy a really nice high quality brush, and for like a 2-inch angled brush, I think you're probably going to spend $25, $30 for a decent brush. And they have brushes for different things. Like oil-based paint, you wouldn't want to use a nylon bristle brush. It doesn't hold the paint well. It doesn't mix well. It doesn't go onto the wall well. You would want to use a natural bristle brush for those. And then also when it comes down to cleaning, you want to clean a nylon bristle brush with the chemicals that you need to clean an oil bristle brush, right? So using the right brush for the right paint is one thing. And it's like the higher quality brushes, paying for a nice high quality brush is another. Buying a cheap brush versus a high quality brush, if you know how to use it, you can really tell the difference. And it has to do with how much paint it holds, how well it comes off the paint, how well it keeps a nice straight line, how many of the bristles are falling out all the time,
or bending over and dragging paint on another surface.
That's the thing, is if you buy a cheap brush and you're brushing in a corner and all of a sudden half the bristles are falling out and being stuck in the wall, you're out there picking them off with some tweezers.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
You know, that's the difference of buying a cheap brush versus a nice brush. And the thing is, if you buy a nice brush and you treat it well and clean it properly every time you use it and store it properly, then it will last. I've had the same brushes for probably 20 years that I bought, eons ago. And I just clean them, I store them, and they are perfect when I reopen them, and they work great. Now, rollers, kind of the same sort of thing. There's your cheap rollers, and then your higher quality. And really, the biggest difference is the same things, like how much paint they hold. Do they, when you load them up with paint, are they dripping out? Cheap quality ones, the material that they're made out of, they don't hold the paint very well, and they also shed. So buying a nice quality roller, they won't shed nearly as much as you're rolling out the wall.
I've got a really good tip for that. When you're tackling a painting project and you're going to be painting over the course of multiple days, instead of cleaning your rollers out every night or day when you are done with them and you're going to pick it back up again tomorrow or the day after, take that pan and the roller, even in the roller cage, and put the roller in the pan, put the whole thing in a plastic bag and tie the plastic bag up tight. And when you take that back out of that plastic bag, all that paint's still wet, the roller is still wet, and you can just add paint and go right along. Now, that only works for a certain amount of time.
Right.
But it beats losing that paint and having to wash out those rollers at the end of every day.
Yeah, I'm with you there. There are tools and things that you can buy too for paint brushes. I don't mind storing a paintbrush overnight, usually one time. I won't do it for more than one because the paint towards the top of the brush where the bristles meet the handle.
Right.
It's all encased in epoxy, and that's how they hold them together. As paint gets up in there, it starts drying. And over time, it is extremely difficult to get out of there. So I don't like to do that. If you really want your brushes to last, I wouldn't do that for very much. But like you said, it's midnight, and you're painting, and you're like, well, I'm going to come back to this in a few hours after this dries. I'll wrap it in saran wrap or something like that.
Here's a tip. When you are deciding the colors that you're going to be painting the walls, and maybe it's vastly different from what you were working with before, you want to probably get a little bit. You can get at the paint store, wherever you're getting your paint, you can get a little bit of this color, and test it on the walls, in a swatchy sort of area, maybe 4 foot by 4 foot or something. And then just really let that soak in and make sure that this is the color that you want before you buy gallons or 5 gallons and paint the whole thing and then decide that you don't love it.
Man, I painted our bathroom. We remodeled our bathroom in our master bedroom. And this was just probably 4 or 5 years ago. And we went and picked out the paint. My wife wanted just like the slightest hint of a blue. Just like the slightest, And so we brought home all these samples, and we took them in there, and we're like, this one, it's perfect. And we got it mixed. I bought 2 gallons of it, painted the whole bathroom, and it looked like a Smurf house.
Oh, it's so much blue.
It was so terrible. And part of it was because the samples that we brought, those little chips, those color chips they give you they're like in a satin. And in the bathroom, we went with a semi-gloss, for one. And 2, the colors of the tiles and the different things we had in the bathroom, after it was all painted, really took an effect on how it looked when it was all said and done. So I ended up having to go back and almost sand, not sand, but like I took a rough sponge and I scrubbed all the walls to knock the gloss down, and I had to repaint them all again with a new color. And that was like a lesson learned. Get a sample, paint it on the wall, let it dry, because one thing about paint is it always looks different after it's dry, always. So you paint it on, let it dry, and then look at it in the room, especially on those small rooms like that. You don't know how it's going to look till it's up, because everything in the room will have an effect. When you're in the paint store, it might look awesome.
Yeah, it has everything to do with the light.
Yep, natural lighting versus fluorescent lighting.
And it has
LED.
a lot to do with your mood. If you eat some bad Mexican food or something while you're out, and then you come in and look at it, might not look as good to you as it did in the paint store. So hold off on dinner until after you've checked on your paint.
I would just say narrow it down, narrow it down to some colors, bring it in, and then narrow it down to one or two, get the samples.
If the color looks like the color of refried beans, it's probably not a good choice.
You were just hungry?
You were just hungry. Choose a different color.
This brown looks really good.
If it's the color of cheddar cheese, it's probably not the color you want the interior walls of your home.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So the next two, right? This is where Corey and I simply do not see eye to eye.
I know there's two tips here. One of them is for you, one of them is for me.
I know. I should give your tip, and you should give my tip.
All right.
Okay, here it is. This is Corey's tip for every single person out there about to tackle a paint project. If you can become good at cutting in a wall and a ceiling into the corner, if you can take your time, have a good brush, have the right amount of paint, be patient, and learn how to cut in a ceiling or where the ceiling meets the wall, you can save money on painter's tape. You do not need tape. You don't need to tape the hardware. You don't need to tape the cabinets. You don't need to tape the ceiling. Just practice at cutting in, become good at it, and you won't need tape. How did that sound? Did that sound like something you would say?
Yeah, this is truth.
Corey is very good at cutting in. We did this painting project. We were just referencing it, actually. This room, the studio where we record our podcast, it was completely empty, and we were painting the walls. And Corey was painting one wall, and I was painting the other wall, and we were back to back. And he turned around to check on my progress, and he was like, "What are you doing? That looks absolutely terrible. That is unacceptable." Folks, almost no one sees this room except him and I. The occasional guest that comes to be on the show. But absolute perfection is what he expects. He's very good with a paintbrush. I will admit it.
So here's the other tip. Not to skimp on tape. And here's the thing. I will say that the tape is good.
If you're relying on
the
it.
tape tip is good. Yeah, if you're relying on tape, don't buy chintzy tape. Don't buy the old brown masking tape.
Right.
Buy high quality, like Frog Tape. We're not sponsored by Frog Tape, but they make a great tape.
We had good luck with it.
Yeah. Frog Tape is amazing. Really high quality blue masking tape that's specifically designed for painting. Because one thing is, if you get the wrong one.
Frog Tape is green.
Right. Or high quality blue tape.
Oh, or high quality blue tape. Okay, I missed that.
But painter's tape is made for paint. And it's made to release. So if you put the wrong tape on and you paint and you peel it off, it might peel everything off underneath of it. And my issue with painter's tape, and I don't use painter's tape. This is the thing. The only time I'll use painter's tape is on an area where I can't avoid it. Like say, where a window, if I'm painting a window or a door where there's glass and I have to get right up tight, I don't like using razor blade. Like a lot of people will just paint over the glass and then razor blade it. I think that's a bad idea because there's coatings on glass now. There's different things, especially in new doors. You can literally scratch the glass with a razor blade. You can buy plastic razor blades and different things that won't destroy glass. But for me, I'd rather just lay a little bit of tape there and then peel it off. The other place I might use it is where I'm painting baseboards and where the baseboard meets my hardwood floor.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
well, the hardwood floor. Yeah.
I'll use tape there. But where my base trim or my door trim meets my wall, or where my ceiling meets my wall, I am not taping. I'm cutting that in every time because it saves me time. I feel like I get a much cleaner line than using tape and then peeling it off and then having to go back. I think it's just a giant waste.
Yeah. Well, I know that that's the way you feel. I'm not as talented of a cutter inner as you are, but I'm remembering this. I'm remembering this tape that was not frog tape.
Snot tape?
Yes, snot tape.
Are they still around?
It's not tape. It's a paint barrier. You remember that? That was their slogan. It's not tape. It's a paint barrier. It's snot tape. That was the catch line right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a fun product. I don't know. It was a little more challenging to use.
Yeah, snot tape. I don't think it's around anymore. It was a product that was like tape, but then it had this goo
on the underneath side.
Green goo, yeah.
Yeah, it had a very positive made a very positive connection with the surface that you were painting and did not allow paint to seep under there.
Right.
Yeah, it was really good.
I don't think it's around. That's too bad.
Oh, there it is right there. Snot tape.
Yeah. Snot tape.
Yeah. That's funny stuff. Anyway, so whether you're a tape user or not a tape user, just make sure if you're depending on the tape, make sure you get the right tape and you use it properly. You gotta make sure that it's on really good.
And don't buy cheap tape.
Don't buy cheap tape.
That's the thing, because the tape, if you're relying on the tape, then you're going to be really mad at yourself when you buy the cheap stuff.
And here's one more last tip. If you use tape to tape off an area and then you paint it, don't leave that tape on too long because that tape it can peel off the whole place.
Right.
You can pull the entire window out of the wall. You never know. It happens.
All right, next one on the list, Tony. Next tip is to paint in the right conditions. What we might mean by that is just keep in mind that humidity levels, temperature, it all affects how painting dries, how long it takes to be in between coats. I've painted some things in my garage in the wintertime and have had very undesirable results because it just takes so long to dry between coats.
Yeah.
And depending on what type of paint you're using.
Yeah. If you're using an oil-based paint.
Yeah.
You need to give that extra time.
Like
extra
a decade,
time.
I swear.
Yeah. And on top of that, if you choose an oil-based paint and you haven't worked with oil-based paint before, you really should be working with a respirator. That's really tough on your insides.
Yeah.
If you're breathing it and breathing it. Yeah.
W technique. Do you know what the W technique is, Tony?
I do. Yeah, I know it. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that would result in the cleanest look, but I get what they're saying.
When you're rolling out a wall, you want to paint big W's on the wall, because if you just grab a roller, load it up with paint, start at the bottom, roll the top, start at the bottom, roll the top, and then up and down, up and up and up and down. What happens is over time, as you finish that wall, you will look and you will see every single roller line. It'll look like stripes down that wall. But if you use the W and you paint in a W, literally just the W, over and back and forth and back and forth, and then fill in between, it will mask the roller lines. and it will give you a much more even coat. Believe it or not.
W painting method for the win.
For the W.
For the
For
W.
the dub.
For the W.
It works.
Just like I was talking about, if you're painting with oil-based paint, even if you're not painting with oil-based paint, make sure that there's proper ventilation and that you're protecting your lungs. Have you ever seen, Corey? Have you ever seen a painter, and he comes in to get a brush or a roller or some Visqueen or something, and there's paint up both nostrils and in and around his eyes.
Oh, like sprayers?
Like they've been spraying and just paint is all over everything because they weren't protecting themselves by wearing a respirator. You know, you just don't want to be breathing that stuff in. That's all I'm saying. If you're going to be doing a big job, just take precautions and protect your lungs.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, you're right. Proper ventilation.
Yeah. If you're breathing all that stuff in your nose too, what a mess. What a mess.
The last one on the list, Tony, and actually I forgot one. I wanted to say, no matter how good of a painter you think you are, I'm a good painter. I feel like I'm a good painter.
I am not.
I've heard this from lots of people even when I paint. They're like, "Oh, you're a good painter." I still will drag the my canvas drop cloths with me. Cover up your furniture, because when you're painting a wall, that roller spins pretty fast.
Right. That's right.
And you're not going to see it. You're not going to drip paint.
Right. It may not be dripping.
But as you're rolling that thing up the wall, little tiny specks of paint are flying off of that roller.
Yep.
And they will land 10 feet away from you.
Yeah.
And you will have, like, if you think I'm just going to push all my furniture to the middle of the room and call it a day, you will have little specks of paint all over everything.
Yeah. Choose a color of paint that matches your furniture, because
you won't have to worry about it.
It's going to be on there.
Yeah.
If you don't cover it. That's a good tip.
Invest in some nice drop cloths or the cheap plastic ones, but I like the nice heavy-duty ones.
Canvas drop cloths are not that expensive.
No,
they're very inexpensive. And so invest in a canvas drop cloth or some canvas drop cloths to cover your valuables. It will be worth it to you.
Absolutely.
The last tip we've got for you is don't rush the process. You know, Corey says to me, patience, patience, patience. The smartest thing you can do is take your time and let it dry and visualize the wall. Know what you have to do next. Paint it again. Let it dry. Visualize the scenario. Just know what you're doing and don't try to rush it, because you'll just end up unhappy and wishing that you had spent a little bit more time.
Nothing is worse than watching paint dry.
Right. Well, plan something away from the walls while it's drying.
Or jump from one room to the next.
Or that. Yep. Go from room to room to room.
Because have you ever put your second coat on too soon? Have you ever done that?
Oh, yeah. And it starts to pull the paint back off.
Yeah. And then
you've just put on there. And you get those little
snotty
things. Yep. I've done it. It's dumb.
Just wait.
It's dumb. Just don't do it.
Yep.
Just simply don't do it. Well, I hope that you got something out of this that you can use. I hope that your next painting project turns out exactly the way you want it to.
Yeah. If we've got any professional painters listening to this and
that have more tips.
Yeah.
Or maybe we're just wrong.
Yeah, you got us flat wrong. Let us know. We are weekend warriors.
That's right.
We paint when we have time.
Usually it's on the weekend.
So we're glad you listened. Hopefully you got some use out of this. If you know somebody painting something, make sure you send them a copy of this podcast and make sure you hit that like. Leave us a comment. Leave us a subscribe and even a positive review.
Love that.
So thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Have a great week.